Tochoya sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolor zampe zeparache pande lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Sikso So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tsechi Nyingne Solwa Debets Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshune Yila Sambe Deden Malupa Gemel Hunge Drubra Jinge Tsoni Sodan Dikdun Shapetse Dunge Namke Yinsu Lekshune Labchen Tsoni Yonsu Zopadan Cherani Dun Chamra Jingel Chancho Parginin Sen Tukun Tu Nyu Peme Siudru Lekshun Chancho Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen de la Drubra Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chumi Samjur Ngimba Shiwad Chodan Tumbe Dudun Malupa Bemel Hunge Drubra Jingelo Dorna Tingne Tira Tamchet Techi Pardune Kava Tamchet Tu Rese Kemne Lama Keleme Tukje Chinge Dala Siksu Gongyab Drewe Nyamta Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuje Rabgongne Kuda Sungi Nawa Dram Nyamsunyongwe Kesan Tobra Sho Kewa Kundu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Cheki Pel Sadan Lamgi Yente Rabzone Dorje Changi Kopa Nyuru Toba Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagelu Pakyuke Sungdan Pakyuke Tugdan Dageyi Teyerme Chiktu Chingelu Makyuke Kudan Dagelu Makyuke Sungdan Dagi Makyuke Tugdan Dageyi Teyerme Chiktu Chingelu Om Muni Shibuki Chushi Meto Tramare Rabalingashi Nide Gempadi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulvarki Drokun namandashi che par sho yidamang guru ratna mandrala kam niryata yami Sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupara Sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupara shua sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibes drola pinchira sangye drupara shu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. When I was quite small, now it's just remembering. Just like when I was about 10, 12 years old, more or less, to about 15, it was like this. I had this attitude that was really, really traditional, extremely traditional. Jokingly, those who knew me well, they would say that I was an old man in a boy's body. I was really rigid in certain things, and then little by little, as I'm getting older, I'm getting younger somehow. But what happens is that for me, I mean, traditions were very, very important to me. Some formalities were very important, and I would sometimes I would give it great importance to something, and then Lama Ganchen would would kind of take it down. I mean, some stories that are coming to my mind that I'm not going to go too much into it, but they made me think about the importance of certain formalities, because what I realized was that, for example, once I was in Milan, before Albagnano Center existed, I was in a kind of attic apartment, and his bedroom was very low, and his bedroom was a kind of tatami with a mattress on top, and often many people would come and gather to talk, and I was there one day, and there wasn't any room for me to sit on the floor around the bed where people normally would sit. So I stayed at the beginning of the hallway at the door, and he said, "No, come, come sit here next to me." And just spontaneously, I thought, no, that it was a lack of respect to sit at his same level, my master. And he insisted, so then it came to the point where it would have been more of a lack of respect to not, follow what he was saying, telling me to do. So I was very uncomfortable. And the next day, the same thing happened. And then, he said, "No, come here and sit." And I sat down without that much discomfort. And then the third day, I came in, and there actually was place around the bed. And instead, I went and sat on the bed with him, on the mattress with him. And I just realized that, certain formalities are necessary to direct our minds. And when we have a stable state of mind, then we don't need these external habits, let's say, or um, the, these formalities. And instead, when it's not completely part of our being, we need to respect them. And I was thinking about this because when we began teachings, we had certain formalities. At the beginning, for example, when I walked in, it's not about me as a person, but the fact that I'm someone who represents in this moment the teachings of Buddha. So so respect should be given, because if if I give respect to something, I'm giving value to it. Otherwise, I just take it for granted and I don't value what I receive. So just standing up, it's not, it's, I mean, it's not obligatory. If you don't want to stand up, you don't have to. But if someone walks in and I stand up, I'm recognizing your presence. I'm not indifferent to your arrival. And then at the beginning, then I made 3 prostrations. This also act of respect, which that for me to remind myself that I am here to share something. It has nothing to do with me personally, but what I'm sharing, what has value, what the so-called Dharma, the teachings, this spiritual path, this should be valued more than the person. And then as I got up here, I snapped my fingers to remind me of impermanence, to tell myself you're going to die. So it's useless to generate any kind of attachment to any form of recognition or power, or instead one needs to be absolutely sincere and recognize that we are going to die, should not be attached to mundane things. And then these so-called prayers, the first one, we remember our masters and the masters of our masters, because if I have something to share today, it's because someone taught me and someone taught them, So it's a way to recognize what we call the lineage, starting from the first teacher, first master, Lama Michel Rinpoche, all the way to the first, let's say, on the other side is Buddha Shakyamuni. So we remember Buddha Shakyamuni, we remember our masters, in this case, particularly Lama Michel Rinpoche, and then after we make the so-called mandala offering. In just a few words, it's at the time of Buddha, Buddha never went to teach something to someone without being requested. Wherever he would go, people would ask him, "Can you explain this to me?" And based on the request, on the base of based on the question, he would explain. If you look at the sutras of Buddha, the so-called, we can call it the Buddhist Bible, the transcriptions of Buddhist teachings, they all begin with a question. They start, one day Buddha was in this place with these people, and these people or this person asked this question, to which Buddha answered this. So it's a tradition that comes from the time of Buddha. So nothing should be taught if it's not first asked. And so these prayers, so that first prayer is the prayer of request to keep this tradition alive. So there is we don't have this concept of wanting to convert someone to Buddhism or convince someone to believe in a certain way. I mean, it starts from the principle that someone should be open and want it. It should be his own interest, his own will. So we don't have this concept of trying to convert anyone. So So we have this rule that says one should not teach to anyone who doesn't ask, in the sense one shouldn't impose something on someone. But once the request is made, it should be respected and done. So we make this, then we make the prayer where we remember why we're here. We generate our motivation. What do we want? Why are we here? So these verses that we recite have this function. Because then there's this could be this danger, that from one thing to the next, and there's some kind of it becomes automatic, and we're not connecting with who's teaching us, or we don't generate the motivation as to why we're here if we don't remember all of this. Instead, our motivation, our inner state of being, the why we're doing something has an enormous importance. Now, to introduce Buddhism a little bit, I'd like to start with his so-called founder, Buddha Shakyamuni, who was a person who lived, they say, around 2,500 years ago. Some say, so, from astrologers or and our archaeologists say instead he lived 2,800 years ago. Sincerely speaking, it doesn't change much for me. The astrologers say this based on, the day that Buddha was born, there's some characteristics of the planet formation. It was a day of eclipse, and the way the planets were is described, and so if you go and look at that, how those planets were as they're described, that goes back about 2,800 years ago. Instead, some archaeologists in this place called Lumbini, where it's said that Buddha died, where he was born, they too, following their research, they come to this date of 2,800 years ago. But whether it's 2,800, 2,500 doesn't change much for me. But they say that he was a person, and like everyone, he had his own difficulties, his own problems. It's normal for anyone. But he had a particular characteristic that normally we don't find this way of explanation in the books or in the classic explanation of Buddha's life. It's my own personal interpretation. I say that because it could be right or maybe it could be wrong. But for me, one of the most important characteristics that Buddha had that then, how can I say, can determine everything that comes after is this fact that he never thought that he had to suffer, because in many, we all say, we don't like to suffer. No one wants to suffer. This is a fundamental point for all of us. At the basis, there's this deep desire to be happy and to not suffer. This is what makes us all the same. Everything that we do. Why do we do it? Because deeply we want, at the end of the day, we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. This is what's at the basis of what we do. It's also said, that if there's something that makes us all the same, is that we all suffer. Nobody wants to suffer. We all want to be happy, and that we do everything that we do thinking that it's the best for our own happiness. But we're guided by our own ignorance most often. But what happens is that in in the history, at a certain point, there's this kind of acceptance, and people say, okay, suffering is part of life. We just need to deal with it and do our best. Instead, Buddha, from my point of view, he said, no, there has to be a way to live without suffering. There has to be a way to be well. Let's remember that he is called the Prince Siddhartha Gautama, and then he was recognized later as a Buddha, but he was the prince. And being a prince, and there are many details of his story. His father, you know, k- um, you know, kept him to the best way possible. The most beautiful palaces and all kinds of pleasures, sensory, of every kind. Some stories say that when he was 15 years old, his father gifted him a harem. I mean, everything that we can imagine as mundane pleasures. I mean, he had it all, a wealth and power, recognition, etc., etc. And at a certain point, he realized that even in spite of all of that, there was still suffering, of sickness, sickness or age, death. Um, I mean, let's tell the truth. I mean, in our modern times today, the way we live, we live better than, materially speaking, we live better than many kings of the past. Is there still suffering or not? There's this joke that someone told me once. It said once they invited an important master from Tibet. Um, he goes to the United States, and he was invited to dinner into this American family, and this master sees everyone happy, and everything seemed perfect, marvelous. Nothing was missing. Everything's fine. Everyone's smiling, etc. At a certain point, as he says to himself, maybe this is happiness. Maybe I've made a mistake. Maybe this is nirvana. Maybe happiness really is here. And at a certain point, he goes to the bathroom, and he was a curious one. So he opens up the medicine cabinet, and he sees medicine for sleeping, for anxiety, as an antidepressant. Oh, and said, now I understand where where the. I mean, we live in a reality where, materially speaking, we have more than what we need, for a comfortable survival. But we know that it's not enough to be at peace with ourselves, in harmony with others. It's not enough. And this is, and Buddha realized this aspect, and he said, I need to find a solution. This is not enough. And at a certain point, he had a son named Rahul. He leaves the palace. He escapes. He didn't have the opportunity to tell his father, now I'm going to go on a spiritual pilgrimage and follow my spiritual path. No, he escapes one morning at dawn. He leaves this life that he had, and he goes he goes looking for all these different spiritual paths. And at the time of Buddha in India, the asceticism was very popular. This exists even today in India, and the concept is, to reach this state of peace, to be well, one needs to transcend one's body, have total control over the body. So what they would do is they would get into meditative states that were very deep, where there was no pain, no suffering, a kind of inner bliss. And they would do many practices of not eating or being in the middle of fire or, with under great heat. I've seen some practitioners like this in India. They do crazy things. The concept is if I can control my body, then I can control my mind. This, in just a few words, is like this. Once I saw a man who decided to make a fist and never open up his hand again. What does that mean? I mean, that means also the nails that grow inside, into the flesh, but even in front of the pain, just didn't open it. Once there was this, every 12 years, there's a meeting of all of these practitioners. It's called Kumbh Mela. It's crazy. The one who decides to lift up his arm and never move it. But imagine the amount of determination and strength one has to have, to make a decision and follow it, even in faced with great pain or discomfort. But Buddha was, he went to the extreme of each one of these systems. For each one of these systems, he practiced better than anyone else. But at a certain point, he realized that he could enter into meditative states that were very, very deep, where he was he would find a state of bliss and peace that transcended the body. But once that meditative state, that meditative state, even though he could keep it for as long as he wanted, but when it finished, that suffering came back. So he said, this is not the path. At a certain point, understood that the solution wasn't something, that the solution wasn't outside, but inside. So he left that context of asceticism and walked towards Bodhgaya, called now today Bodhgaya, and entered a state of meditation to find a state of harmony with himself and consequently with the world around him. There are all the technical terms, but I'm trying just to put it into simplified terms. So for that period, the long time he was there, he reached this state of nirvana, this state of peace, which in a few words is when a person is able to reach an inner state of being where he perceives reality in a consistent way. There's no more selfishness, there's no more anger, attachment, dissatisfaction, etc. A state where one is in deep state of peace with oneself and with others, independently of the situation he finds himself in. Just in a few words, this is it. And when he reached this state, and at that moment he's called Buddha. Buddha means literally in Tibetan it's said Sangye, which literally means eliminate and develop. Sang means eliminate and Gye means to develop. So a state where one has developed one's own qualities like love and wisdom and awareness, peace to its maximum potential, and has eliminated completely as a consequence one's own ignorance and selfishness, jealousy, anger, etc., etc. And as a consequence, one lives a state of peace and harmony with oneself and others. This is what we mean by Buddha. When we say the Buddha, we're talking about the historical figure of Buddha Shakyamuni. But when we say a Buddha, it's a state of being, not a person. And in some cases, it makes reference to a specific person. I mean, when I say doctor, for example, when I talk about, a doctor is maybe doesn't make reference to a specific doctor, but can. So, and then Buddha started traveling, and then he started sharing with them, those he met, shared with them how to reach that same state. But generation after generation, at 80 years old, he left his body. So his disciples transmitted these teachings, this knowledge, these practices, and gradually, and they've come to us. They've gotten to us. What I want to bring to you today is a little bit the idea not getting into all the details, but a more general idea so that we can apply it to our own lives of, of is what Buddha transmitted to us. What is this? What is this path of Buddhism that has so many different traditions within it? Because Buddha himself, he taught in different ways to different people. And when he died, his disciples got together and I it was a moment of, I don't mean chaos, but a little bit of conflict there, um, uh, arose because one said, Buddha said this to me, and then another disciple said, well, he said that to me, and so who's right? And so they created different traditions. Even right after his death, the 4 traditions were created, and then they became 18 traditions. 18 because they were 18 different places where Buddha taught, which, for example, because he would give, for the monastic tradition, for example, he would adapt them to those who were present. So this gave really this openness to adapt to the context and the people who were present. Let's get back to the roots. Let's say that a few years ago, now many years I have to say, I had a moment of crisis of my own because I was in a great monastery in India where I was studying, the monastery of Sera. I saw that I saw things I didn't like, situations that I really didn't like. And at a certain point, I asked myself, well, what am I doing here? I loved what I was doing, but there were some difficulties, and I was able to find an answer for myself, making a clear division, and I follow it still today. The difference that there is between spirituality, one's own spiritual path, religion, and religious institution. The spiritual path is something that goes beyond religion. It's not a choice, it's a need. It's this inner process of the development of patience, of love, of satisfaction, balance, and our life's process that goes beyond our external appearance. It's what we learn day after day. It's our identity on a deeper level, what we can transform, It's good for all of us to develop patience and satisfaction, respect, gratitude, love, wisdom. This is good for everyone. This is the main objective that is in the so-called spiritual path. Religion, instead, is the method that is used to help us along our spiritual path. Religion, from my point of view, is made up of 3 parts. We have a worldview, a paradigm, how things are. We have rules of conduct. This should be done. This you shouldn't do. This is good. This is bad. And then we have tools, prayers, meditation, sacred art, imagery, to help us to put into practice what is taught. And then there's the religious institution, which is an organization that's created by humans to be at the service of religion. So the religious institution is at the service of religion, and religion is at the service of the spiritual path. When I saw this, I understood that my problem was with the institution and not with the religion or with the path. And we are humans with our own problems, each one with his own, and that just shows up everywhere. Buddhism is made up of these three three parts: a view, a world view, conduct, and then the tools. Let's start with the first one. First of all, every one of us, inevitably, we perceive reality through ourselves. We could say, 5 main filters through which we perceive reality. Let's imagine taking a picture, but you know, so now we have like this sensor that takes the light, between that and the lens, takes the picture. There are many filters. So when I see you, it's true that I'm seeing you, but in reality, I'm seeing my version of you. The filters that we have are, first of all, there's a filter called Rikki Gyunten in Tibetan. It's our genetics, our characteristics that come from our parents, grandparents, our ancestors, from a physical point of view, but also from a mental point of view. There are studies, for example, that show that some traumas, some fears are transmitted genetically, in animals and also in human beings. So we're strongly influenced from the context of our parents or how we were raised. So there's this first part that's genetic, and whether we want it or not, we're strongly influenced by the experiences that our parents and grandparents and our ancestors have lived, and genetics mutate, they change, and today we talk about epigenetics, So when I have children, for example, I'm transmitting I'm transmitting the DNA to my children that I receive, the DNA that I receive from my parents, but I'm transforming it a little. So I'm handing down also, or we receive also, the experiences that were handed down from our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, etc. So this is one filter. Then there's another filter that's called Renke Gyunten, which is our spontaneous characteristics. Here is something more specific to Buddhism explanations. There are our innate characteristics that we take from one life to another. When we believe in Buddhism that when a child is born, the child didn't come from nothing. It's on a new life. It's like Lama Ganchen he would use the metaphor like that the body is like a hotel room. You go in, you use it for a while, and then you leave it and you check in to another hotel room. So when a small child, when a baby is born, it's not that he's not coming from nothing. He has qualities that he's bringing already. Those of you who have children, you know better than I do. When a child is born, does he already have his personality? Or if you have more than one child, do you have, are the children exactly the same? What I've seen in my small experience, there's already, when a child is born, even when twins are born, when twins are born, maybe they're similar in many things, but very different in many others. So our deep habits, we bring them from life to life. So someone who is really used to lie is born with this predisposition to lie, or someone who has a lot of is used to meditating will be born with it'll be easy for that person to meditate. Kindness or jealousy is the same. So one was born. It's not. It may not show up immediately, but one has this predisposition. And the next one are the the traits that we develop based on our social context, what we're learning. You know, all the based on the information that we receive in life. They shape this third filter. When I see a situation, for example, I judge it, I interpret what I'm seeing through all the information that I have received up till today. And it's changed. And so that's why this an experience, the education we've received, our cultural, our cultural context, this influences tremendously. And the fourth filter has to do with the experiences we've had, because one thing is the information that we get, and then our direct experiences, that's something different. So all the experiences that we've lived directly, they gradually shape our worldview. This is another filter that we have, independently of whether someone has told me that if I, by drinking water, I maybe even if someone tells me that water is bad for you, but every time I drink water, I feel good. So I have the information that that I shouldn't drink water, but I have an experience that doesn't match the information that I've had. So this life experience shapes this fourth filter. The fifth filter is our actual body. We perceive reality through our own senses. And when we see something, we think that what we're seeing is reality. But we don't realize that what I see is a reflection of light that touches my eyes. And I can perceive, based on my own senses, a little. If I take, for example, I understood this a little bit better not too long ago. If I take this text, for example, take this. If I ask you, what color is this? It's not a trick. It's not a trick question. Objectively, what color is this? It's red. Don't be afraid of saying so. It's red. So it's red. But if I ask myself, why is it red? The answer, because it's red. Because someone made it like this. I bought it like this. It's red because it's red. Some time ago, I was trying to teach something to my puppy, and the veterinary, our friend Sylvia, she said, do something when you're in the woods, let her go, and then hide and have her come back. But for you, it's easier because you're always dressed in red, and for the dog, there's almost no difference between green and red. I mean, every being has an ability to perceive the light spectrum differently. I mean, what we as human beings can see, is the light frequencies that we can see is minimum compared to what other animals can see. Bees that can see ultraviolet rays that we can't see, for example. So so if I ask my dog, what's the difference between this color and that color? She would say, not so much the difference. So in reality, I mean, why is this red? Because light touches the object, comes back to my eyes with a certain frequency, and as a human being, I'm able to perceive certain frequencies in a certain way, and that's why I say that this color is red. But a being next to me that has a sense power, an eye sense power that's different, will see it differently. I have a friend, for example, who would do horrible graphic things, still does. And I would say, but this is really bad taste. And at a certain point, I realized that he was colorblind. I mean, he just saw colors differently. And then I understood why why you try to put these colors together, because you just see them differently. To say that also sound. Once someone said to me, there's certain sound frequencies that we can hear as adolescents, but after adolescence, we don't even hear them anymore. And there's some luxury stores, for example, that don't want younger clientele. They can actually install some kind of mechanism that emits a sound frequency that only adolescents can hear, a kind of buzz that older people can't hear. So when I hear something, I mean, when we hear something, I mean, we think that what the sound that's coming is the sound that's there, but I'm hearing that sound through my ears, through my own sense power. But what I hear may not be what you hear. Now I'm going to jump a couple uh, as I'm speaking. And, I mean, what's coming to your hearing? Sounds or words? Without analyzing, we'd say words are coming to our ears.
Niente da keja shedo kiran so amjola kare raj ko do sik ko do dra ko do tyong ko do kane raj resha. Adesso?
Now, I mean, I asked you the same thing, but in Tibetan. So in reality, for example, has it ever happened to say something and then the other person understood something differently? That can happen, huh? How does it happen? How is it that when we speak to each other, as I'm speaking, I mean, what happens? I have ideas, I have concepts, I have feelings that I'm going to translate. I'm going to translate them into sounds. Then I emanate sounds. They go into the microphone. They come to you, to your hearing, and then you give meaning to all of those sounds. We speak the same language, so we have a convention between sound and meaning. But in reality, what you're hearing, what you hear, you're not hearing words, you're hearing sounds to which you are giving a meaning. That's why verbal communication often doesn't work, because I have an idea, I have a concept, I transform it into sounds. You receive those sounds and you give those sounds a meaning, and that they don't always match. It's happened many times, 2 times actually, where it just became emblematic for me. Once I was in the airport in America. I was at the airport. Kuten Lama had accompanied me, and we were drinking tea. And at a certain point, he asked me a question, and it seemed incredibly offensive what he was asking me. I said, "Oh, what? How could he be saying that?" Okay, so I'm just gonna pretend that I didn't understand. And then he repeated it again, and then he repeated it yet again, and I was just about to answer. I was quite agitated, and then I did a little pause, rewind. I listened again, to the memory of the sound I'd heard, and I realized that he mixed up. He mixed. He used Tibetan and English together, and it was a simple question about whether I wanted milk in my tea, but that word in English put together in the sentence in Tibetan, meant a totally different thing. Luckily, I was able to go back, rewind, and listen again, and make sense of it all, before I answered. And other things, similar things have happened to me too. My point is, when we listen to we're hearing sounds and we attribute meanings to these sounds. And I going to take advantage to give some advice, a practical advice in life that's helped me a lot too. Never say you said this, because what you said, I I will never know, but I understood this. So, or even even better, what I remember what I remember understanding is this, because what I remember today is going to be different from what I remember, um, 10 years ago. I mean, then we can avoid so many conflicts. So here, what can we see? That when we see something, when we perceive something, any situation, we see that situation through the filter of ourselves. We have our genetic part, our predispositions that come from other lives, or this one. We have our knowledge, our education, our experiences, and we have our own body. In the body, for example, if there's a hormonal change, I mean, does this change our reality, perception of reality or not? I'm sure that also men have hormonal cycles, not just women, you know, if if you know it, but even if they don't have like a very clear sign, the way that women do, But I know men. You can feel their their hormonal cycle, and then those hormonal cycles change our perception of things. One feels more nervous, etc. So our body and mind, they're deeply connected, and we perceive reality through all these filters. And this takes us to a principle. Um, uh, I mean, what I'm seeing, what I'm perceiving is not reality, but is reality that I am perceiving through all these filters. And anyone next to me is perceiving that same reality, maybe in a similar way, but as a Tibetan proverb says, anything that is similar is by definition different. If we were raised in the same social cultural context, or a uh, similar education, we read the same newspapers, maybe we've had similar experiences, but we're going to perceive reality in a similar way, but still different. And if that context, that cultural context, is very different, then it'll be quite different. So a fundamental point to be able to understand Buddhism a little bit is starting from the point that all of us, whether we want it or not, we live within a paradigm. We live within our own worldview. And you can't do differently. For example, I see everything through a paradigm that was made up by everything that I've lived up till today. And it's the same for all of us. This is clear, isn't it? Buddha, in his worldview, he wanted to take four fundamental points of this world view, and he explained them differently. These 4 points determine the way we live. And we can understand these 4 points through 4 questions. And we already have the answer to these 4 questions, whether we're aware of it or not. It's not a question, it's not conceptual, it's something deeper. The first question is, what is suffering? In other words, what do I want to avoid in my life? What do I not want? where do I recognize suffering? What do I want to avoid? The second question is, why do I suffer? What are the causes of my suffering? And the third question is, what it, what is happiness? What do I want, in other words? And the fourth question, how can I get there? How can I not suffer and be happy? So what is suffering? Why do I suffer? What's happiness? And what can I do to be happy and not suffer? So, what's the most ordinary and way with most of us? How would we? We're all different. So there's not going to be an identical, one single answer. But what is suffering? It's by two types. There's the physical suffering and there's mental suffering. It's described as a sensation, as a feeling. They're all feelings that we have that we want them to end as soon as possible and not come back. This is the feeling of suffering. There's a physical suffering, a hot and cold and hunger and thirst, pain. These are feelings that come through our senses directly. We want them to go away and to never come back. And then there's mental suffering. Mental suffering, these are these inner states of being where one has a feeling that they want to go away as soon as possible and to not come back, but it's not caused by something physical. It's sadness, anxiety, dissatisfaction, anger. I mean, do we have more physical or mental suffering? Mostly is mental suffering. A master of Lama Ganchen called Kyabse Dzong Rinpoche was extremely direct, and one teaching that I listened to, he died in 1985, I listened to teachings of his where he said their suffering is of two types, mental and physical. The poor people suffer mostly from physical suffering. Rich people suffer mostly from mental suffering, but at the end of the day, they suffer the same. Because, as we see, I mean, when there's great physical suffering, we worry a lot less about all the problems out there, and when we have, but instead, when physically we're fine, the mind goes off, and plays its games. So we have these two types. This is what we recognize as suffering in general terms. But why do we suffer? When we suffer, what do we do? I mean, spontaneously, do we say, oh, I'm suffering? Or do we ask ourselves why? We try to find out why. We do, don't we? And often we point the finger at something or someone. But even in reality, when we're feeling a moment of pleasure or joy, we ask ourselves why. And normally we find the reason why we're feeling what we're feeling. I remember once I was in India. It was a particular moment because I was traveling. I had the suitcases just full. I was in Calcutta, and I was in from domestic flights to international flights. There was some kind of restructuring the airport, so you had to go outside, go through the parking lot, with the parking lot where it was really, really difficult with the cart. It was 45 degrees outside. And I remember as I was there with the cart that I was having a hard time push. I had to push and pull, and I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go. It was just amazingly hot. And at a certain point, I just felt so joyous. it was strange because I had this deep sense of joy and I couldn't identify the cause. It's not that I was going to do, d- do something special, for, this trip. No, it was when I had this experience of that, you know, when we have this inner sensation, this inner feeling, we're looking for a reason. I mean, this is what we do. And I was looking for a reason. So, and when we suffer, I mean, we point the finger to something or someone, and normally it's mostly towards the situations around us, or is it just do we say, um, it's the way I'm living the situation? No, it's someone comes to me and says something to me that hurts me. Where do I point my finger? My inability to hear what that person said, or the traumas of the past, that brought me to have that reaction, or do I blame the person who said that thing? That person, our spontaneous way of acting, why do we suffer? Mostly we think we suffer for three reasons, and here you can see that we're we're not that different from the people at the time of Buddha. The, these explanations were given, in India, the 2,500 years ago, in a very, very different context. But I don't think we've changed that much, and that's why Buddhism works so well. We think that we suffer for three reasons. We think that we suffer because we can't have what we want, because the world is not the way I think it should be, because people aren't the way they should be. The situation isn't the way it should be. Often we suffer much more because something is not the way we think it should be, instead of for actually how it is. So we think that we're suffering, one, because we can't have what we want. People, situations, objects, etc. Second, we think we're suffering because we need to live situations that we don't like. We need to come into contact with people who act in a way that we don't like. We need to live situations that are unpleasant. We need to come into contact with objects that we don't like. So the first, we can't have our object of desire. And number two, we need to come into contact with objects of aversion, something we don't like. And the third, we think that we believe because we need to be separated from the objects that we like, people, situations, and objects. And if we see when we suffer, normally, I mean, we project onto one of these three things. Why am I suffering? Because it's not like this. Oh, because that's like this. Oh, because I need to leave. I need to leave, I need to be separated from a person or a place. I need to let go of an object. A moment is ending, and we suffer. Someone speaks in a way that we don't like. We meet someone we don't like. Or, something we don't like, we suffer. Or we would like something to be in a certain way, and it's not, and we suffer also for that. I mean, are we able to recognize ourselves among these three? In these three? And these, in generally speaking, this is why we suffer, why we think we suffer. We can get into many, many details, but in this moment, it's not the case. The third question, I mean, what is happiness? We project our happiness onto something, don't we? To say, normally, usually, we put our energy into trying to be happy and to not suffering. Where? In creating a world around us, it's quote unquote perfect, or by transforming the way we live the world. In reality, we try, you know, we think that happiness is having everything we want, being able to avoid everything we don't want, and keeping everything that we like and we have. And if we asked ourselves, just imagine, just allow yourself to dream. If I could have everything I desire, if I could avoid everything I dislike, and if I could keep forever everything I like, would I be happy or not? Yes. It's a shame that it's not possible, but if you ask me, I say yes. I said, okay, you have this. If someone said, okay, there is this possibility, I say, thank you very much. So we project our happiness onto an idealized reality where we can have what we want, where we can avoid what we don't want, and we want to keep what we like, what we have. We project this onto the world around us. So we think the person should be like this, should think like this, should be the way I think he should be. We project, we think that the political situation should be like this, the social situation, my material situation should be like this, my children, my parents, my spouse. We have this idealized image of how the world should be, to make me happy. And what we do, we try to obtain our objects of desire, avoid our objects of aversion, and keep our objects of attachment. And just in a few, I don't know if that's clear. I mean, do you recognize yourself in this a little bit? This is the normal view of things. And Buddha, what he did instead, he said, sorry, but this is just a trap. It's an illusion. It doesn't work. And he brought us a different worldview. And there are 4 different answers. What happens before getting into the view that Buddha transmitted? Once I was talking to some people, and I asked them, "You like meditating?" Yes, yes, yes. When I meditate, I really enjoy it. I asked them what kind of meditation it was. Oh, the one is the self-healing that Lama Ganchen transmitted. And when I do it in the morning, I feel so good. And I said, oh, well, then you must do it every day. I said, well, no, I haven't done it for 3 months. And my question is, why? Why? The reason why is because the strength that drives us in life is desire. Desire is the strongest of forces. And in a few words, we don't do what we don't want to do. We put energy into what we think is going to make us happier and help us avoid our suffering. So according to what I project, what I think happiness is, what I think my cause of happiness is, I'm going to put my energy into that. So one of the first questions is what do I want? It's important to understand. I mean, where I put my energy is where I project my happiness. So it's not a philosophical, it's not a question of philosophy. It's very tangible. Where do you put your energy? So let's look at Buddha's view. So that it's a graduated process to change one's paradigm. It doesn't happen automatically. So what is suffering? What should I avoid? In our view, we see that suffering is this feeling of mental or physical suffering. And Buddha says, yes, but there are 2 other levels of suffering. Let's remember that suffering is not just the feeling of suffering, but that which we should avoid. In other words, it's that which cannot sustain us happiness. So we have suffering of suffering, which is the physical and mental suffering, in just a few words, the one we talked about before. And then he explained a second type of suffering, which is not suffering, but is of the nature of suffering. For example, if I'm very, very thirsty and I drink water, is it pleasurable or not? No, it gives me a sense of well-being to drink water if I'm thirsty. But if I keep drinking water, 1 glass, two, a liter, 2 liters, and I just keep drinking water, the more water I drink, the more pleasure I have and the greater it becomes, or does it diminish until it gets to suffering? It diminishes. A person that we love comes to us and caresses us. Do we like it? And that's so nice, but it goes on and on. 15 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, with the same intensity, this is the same way. You know, you don't want to be rude. You say, "Oh, I need to get up and go to the bathroom." But what happens is it's bothersome after a while. So what at the beginning was very pleasurable, if it's maintained, it doesn't, that sensation of pleasure doesn't increase. It actually diminishes after a while. A, a personal example, panettone, for example. I like panettone. But what would happen if that the imagine that the time of panettone comes and I buy 52 panettones, one a week, you know, after the third month. I've had this experience already, not with panettone, but with mozzarella, because once during during teachings in Milan, I started talking about how much I like mozzarella, and a disciple, every week she would bring me really delicious mozzarella, which it was wonderful, but after a while it just lost its value. And so it doesn't matter how good something is. When we maintain contact with that thing, gradually that feeling of pleasure diminishes. And here I take advantage to open for mundane advice. It's not spiritual, but we live in this world and we're made of flesh and bones, so we need some mundane advice too. If there's something that you like, situations, places, people, objects that we like, that we feel good with, the panettone for me, for example, we need to maintain a relationship of conquest and seduction. What's the seduction of panettone? It's just that it's just once a year, and the conquest is just I need to wait all year. And another aspect of seduction, another is it's not really good for me, so I can't eat too much. So I really need to choose the really good one. The part of the seduction is waiting. So if we maintain this relationship of seduction, it's not obvious or immediate, and this conquest, so we need to put energy into getting it. If we can, then we can keep this we can keep up these feelings of satisfaction and pleasure. It's a place I like. If I go there all the time, after a while it loses its value. You see this in the relationship with people. At the beginning, there's the beginning, everything is appreciated. Oh, he cooked this for me, and then years go by, and one takes it for granted. So we need to rejoice for what we have, but keep this game going a little bit. Otherwise, it loses value. Why? Because in reality, it's not the water is not to blame, but it's it's the value that I give to water. Water cannot sustain my happiness. And there are the three traps of happiness. Sensory pleasures. And there's nothing wrong with sensory pleasures, but they're not able to sustain a state of satisfaction and happiness, no matter how much I have. And in our daily life in general, when someone has no limits in the sensory pleasures, then does one get to a point where they are satisfied, or do they always need more? I mean, do I want the object, or do I want the feeling of satisfaction and pleasure? Years ago, so it was the same week, I had two times where once I was with friends, I was at their house, and they were wine tasting. I mean, I don't drink, and I was watching them. Oh, because this wine has this, wood, and it's like this, and it's like that, and they're going on about the whole story of the wine. Everyone does what they like. And then a few days later, I I was with someone who liked drinking wine a lot, but even if it was out of a box. And I started to think about it. I said, you know, between these two groups, I mean, who gets more pleasure? The one who has the refined tastes, you know, refined tastes, or the one that's just happy with any kind of wine. So, so to be more refined is really counterproductive. I saw this in India, um, no matter what food, no matter what food I was given, what kind of oil that was given, it was the same. Instead, here I came to Italy, the oil had to be like this or like that. So what I mean to say is that sensory pleasure, there's nothing wrong with sensory pleasures in themselves. This is not a sin to have a sensory pleasure, but it doesn't matter how many I can get, they cannot sustain a state of satisfaction and pleasure. The more I have, the more I want. Is this clear? The second trap of happiness are material things. So once I was at a school in Milan called Maria Pizziconi. I was invited. I was in I was invited to talk at this school at a time where I was a lot more available. When I was invited somewhere to speak, I would go. And I got to this school, and I, they told me to talk about Buddhism, I got into the gym, and there were about 200 children, like 5 to 6 years old. So they were seated on the floor, and then the teachers on the benches around. And they told me I had a month, sorry, an hour and a half to talk about Buddhism. I said, okay, let me try. And so to keep their attention alive, I made questions to get answers. And I saw it was really nice that when you talk with children, they answer in harmony. And I was explaining the nature of desire, and I asked them, children, is there a toy that you'd like to have? They all together answer yes. Did it ever happen that for your birthday or for Christmas that you were able to get the toy that you wanted? They all, yes. Were you happy? Yes. How long did your happiness last? A long time or just a short time? Some didn't say anything. Then they say just a short time. And I said, do you still have the toy? Yes. Does it still make you happy as before? No. Is there a new toy that you want? Yes. Then how long is that new toy going to make you happy? A long time or short time? And they were really a little sad, a little confused, and they said, "Oh, just a short time." I mean, they weren't gifted children. We all know it. They, you know, we just since children, we're just changing our toys, to the extreme. Once I was with a friend in Brazil, and we were about to get into his private plane, and he looked at me and he said to me in English, before getting on the plane. He said the only difference between big and small boys is the size of their toys. So, as children, we have a toy, and then after a while, we don't like it anymore, and then we change it for clothes and the sensory pleasures, and then there's a car, and then there's this and there's that, and we're just constantly changing our so-called toy because we don't know another game to play. So we just keep repeating that to get to this. My point is that material wealth or material things, the more I have, the better I am. What about money, for example? Does money bring happiness? Yes, I think yes, but with a big but. The United Nations did research. They do this actually every year, every couple of years. There's a report. It's called, it's the World Happiness Report, where they talk about the level of satisfaction and happiness on a world level. And once I had it, it's a big, big book in my hand. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read some parts of it. And there's one part of the research they did, and the question was, does money bring happiness? And the answer was yes, up to a certain point. What's that point? If I don't have enough money, if I don't have enough money to nourish my body to eat, I'm going to suffer more. If I can't take care of myself when I'm sick, I'm going to suffer more. If I can't protect myself from the elements, heat and cold, I'm going to suffer more. If I can't educate my children, there's some basic needs, material needs, that if we're under that level, we're going to suffer more. And this research discovered that once those basic needs are met, it doesn't matter how much more one accumulates or saves. One's happiness doesn't increase. It doesn't increase your level of satisfaction and happiness above that level. I imagine that all of us are above that threshold of having our basic needs met. Nothing is lacking here materially. I know people who have enough money for this life and another 10 lives. One person actually asked me, a man came to me and said, Lama, in Buddhism, you have this system of being able to recognize reincarnations. I explained how it worked, and he said, well, if before I die, I made a trust fund and I put in like maybe 200 million, and I and then I leave someone responsible to find my reincarnation. I said, oh, it'd be wonderful if it could work, but personally, I wouldn't trust that. It would be a great business plan, though. Like money transfer from one life to the next. In the doubt before dying, you never know. But obviously, personally, I wouldn't trust something like that. But what I mean, I know people who have money for this life and many future lives, but I've never seen. I haven't seen them as happier, more satisfied beings compared to those who had a lot less. I mean, once we're above a certain threshold, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much we get. I mean, when we get something material, we like it. Like if I came around and I gave everyone 500 euros, without any kind of, just a gift, no commitment, we'd be happy, wouldn't we be? What happens though is that it doesn't matter how much I get. At first, we're happy, but after a while, if I keep contact with that object, that sensation of joy and pleasure and satisfaction, it cannot be sustained. Let's remember, there's nothing wrong with material things and wealth. The problem is projecting our happiness onto those things because they're not able to sustain our happiness. As it's also, as we say, the more I have, the more I want, because it can't sustain it. Because what I want is not the car. What I want is that feeling of satisfaction that I project onto that object. And when that feeling goes away, I want that feeling of satisfaction to come back. So I look to find another object. What's that third trap? Is power, recognition, image. When someone compliments us, we like it, don't we? A classic example is when we go to someone. Someone says, "Oh, that person, the one that you really like, said something really nice about you." And so our aunt, and then we say like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What did you say? I mean, of course we understood, but it was like just massaging our ego, so we like to hear it again. But reality is that the more recognition we have, the more recognition we want, the more power we have, the more power we want. It's never enough. Somehow, it's not directly connected, but somehow it reminds me of the story of Alessandro Magno, Alexander the Great. So he was in the north of India, and he was at the Indus River near Alexander the Great, and he was in front of a naked man, kind of meditating. In And in the biography of Alexander the Great, they called him the gymnosoph, the wise naked man. He asked him what he was doing. He was a kind of sadhu, people who dedicate their lives to meditation, and some of them just stay naked and even have ash on their body. So he asked him, "What are you doing?" And he answered to Alexander the Great, "I'm reflecting on nothingness." And Alexander the Great started laughing. He said, "How useless. It's just meditating on nothing." And then he asked him, "What are you doing?" And Alexander the Great said, "I'm conquering the world." And the gymnosoph, he started laughing. He said, "What a useless thing." And actually, who wants to conquer the world? I mean, it's not enough to just try to manage one's own household or job, or, imagine having to manage, country and country. So when you conquer something, there's power, and you want that feeling, you want that power, you need to conquer more and more. So recognition of our own image, or receiving praise, or having power is pleasurable, but it can't sustain the happiness, because the more I have, the more I need for that feeling to be upheld. So these three traps, I call them like this, Buddha called the suffering of change, things that we think are good for us, but that sooner or later become suffering. So, we project our happiness onto these things normally, but they can't sustain our happiness. So we shouldn't project our happiness onto sensory pleasures, material wealth, or our image or recognitions, which doesn't mean to not have any of those things, but see them as being things that are part of our life but that cannot sustain our happiness. The third type of suffering is called the all-permeating suffering. Is this fact of, I mean, some, sometimes, I've had people come to me and say, Lama, I like to take vacation from myself. And I say, I'm sorry, it's just not possible. Wherever we go, we bring ourselves along. Have it happened to you? Maybe maybe it's happened to you or to someone you know, where you're stressed because of you stress and you blame it on work, and then you go on vacation and you're stressed on vacation. What happens is that wherever I go, it doesn't matter with whom I find myself or in the situation I find myself, I'm going to live all of that through my own filters, my own fears, anxieties, my sadness, my filters, my good and bad sides. I mean, there's nowhere to go. The all-permeating suffering is that we pollute the world and every situation with our so-called mental defilements. We pollute the world that we live through what we perceive, these dirty filters. We have dirty filters of jealousy and fear and anxiety and arrogance, dissatisfaction, a selfishness, this obsession with self-gratification, our ignorance, etc. And as long as I will have my own conflicts, inner conflicts, dirty filters, then I'm going to live a world through those filters. So it's not enough to be in a beautiful place, pleasurable, harmonious place, and where nothing is lacking. I could be in heaven. But if I'm angry, if I'm dissatisfied, I can make heaven a hell. Just think of our own planet Earth. Nature, are there not all the resources available to make this planet paradise? But look at the conflicts that exist on a familial or at work or on a national level, on an international level. Where do these conflicts begin? Because the resources are lacking, or do they come from selfishness, attachment? They come from our own behavior. So what happens is I can be in the most beautiful context, but as long as I live that through the filters of anger, dissatisfaction, etc., I'm going to live it badly. For example, there's a term, I understood it. The term I use is wrong, and I would keep using the wrong term in psychology. It's called selective cognition, but it's actually called something else. The concept is, I mean, we see what we want to see. The example that I had for myself on a very practical level, and I use this so we can understand more. A few years ago, doing work here at the center, construction at the center, an architect said that sooner or later you need to make these cabins of transformation cabins, electrical transformation cabins. And then when he told me how big the bigger they should be and how much they cost, I said, no way. I've never seen these. No one else has anything like this. Why do we need to do it? He said, no, they're everywhere. And then after a while, soon after I had this in my mind, and I traveled from here to Malpensa, and I started seeing these I started seeing them like mushrooms that just everywhere. And my feeling was before they didn't exist. I mean, I've taken this trip. I've taken this road so many times. I've never seen them, and then just from one day to the next, they're everywhere. You know, you know, they're they're the ones that are. There's so many. Now we have our own that's down here by the parking lot. But what happens is when the mind is not open to see something, it's as if it just doesn't exist. And it's explained that very often we see and we create a storyline of reality to justify our feelings. If at a certain point in my life, for whatever reason, off during your childhood, let's say, I feel abandoned. I feel that people that the people that should have been there for me weren't, and I feel like I can't trust anyone. I feel abandoned. As long as I have that feeling of loneliness, of abandonment inside, I'm going to try to live reality through that to justify that feeling, creating stories around me. You see, you've abandoned me. I've seen people who've had that strong feeling of abandonment. They 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 would say, "Bye, I'm leaving," and then say, "You let me leave." You know, we perceive reality around us, often trying to justify feelings that we have. We live it through our feelings. If I have sadness or anger or resentment, if a feeling of abandonment or loneliness, whatever it is, we are often trapped in that past experience and we live our present through that filter. And through this, we get to that second question, why do I suffer? What Buddha said is that it's not true that we suffer from external causes, but we suffer because of our so-called filters that we have. A short time ago, I had an experience that taught me something that showed me from a different perspective. In the same days, I had two situations. One situation, like, let's call it very difficult, I mean, it would have been difficult to live. But instead, I lived it harmoniously. I would prefer not to have to go through it again, but it didn't unbalance me. It didn't take away my peace. I was I was quite neutral in that situation. I didn't suffer in that situation. I just in the same days, that same period, I experienced something that like really simple, very banal, and I really lost my balance. It really made me suffer, and I asked myself, in that very difficult situation, I stayed calm, and instead, something that was nothing, um, really agitated me, and then I saw that when something touches something inside, whether it's a wound from the past or, you know, it just really highlights some filter that we have. I mean, that really highlights those feelings, and we live that experience through that pain. Instead, if even a very difficult situation, if it doesn't touch you, then you stay balanced. But often we don't see this dynamic, and we think that the fault is outside, but it is our emotional states of beings, our experience of the past. This is the filter that is going to matter, and how we react. Instead, Buddha said that our mental defilements and our actions of the past, our karma, these are determining. You know, we are a result of everything that we have done in the past. I mean, we have the, you know, we are, I mean, we're living the result of things, of decisions that we made when we were, you know, in our adolescence, in our childhood, you know, today, throughout our whole life. I mean, just in a few words, you know, this is just a few words. It's been too simplified, this idea of karma. I mean, everything we do, little by little, it will bring a result. I mean, action brings results. And today we bring the results of the actions that we have done physically, you know, our verbally, our mental actions. And at the same time, we live life through our emotional state of being. If I'm dissatisfied, I'm going to see the world as if I never have enough, even if what I have is more than enough. If I have a deep fear or anxiety or any other mental state that generates suffering, I'm going to live the world through that and suffer. So we talk mostly about three mental defilements, which is aversion, so anger, resentment, hate. Attachment, desire, projecting our happiness onto things that are not able to actually sustain them, and the basis of all that is ignorance. And at the basis of that is selfishness. So at the basis of our, the root of our suffering is this grasping at self-gratification. I mean, look back at times that you've suffered. You know, look back at times you've suffered. In those times you suffered, was the I or the my present or not? And you see, we divide everything into three categories. Things that are good to me, for example, they're my friends. And things that are bad for me is my enemy. And what's good and what's neither good nor bad for me, I'm just indifferent to. The friend of the friend is my friend. So who benefits my friend is also my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we have the one who benefits me as my friend, the one who benefits the one who benefits my friend is my friend, and who harms my enemy is also my friend. You know, so we really can unite having a often we are closer if we have an enemy, a common enemy. You know, and an enemy can also be a sickness. You know, if at a certain point I realize that you have this same sickness that I have, you know, then we have something in common, you know. Or if I find that you don't like the same person that I don't like, oh, okay, then, you know, even if I don't know you. And then we also have the one who harms me as my enemy, the one who harms my friend is my enemy, and the one who is good to my enemy is my enemy. It's sad to say, but this is true. And then those who do neither good nor bad to my enemies, you know, this can be people or situations, you know, then I'm neutral, you know. And this happens all the time. I'm walking down the road. I see three people. One is beautiful to me, one is ugly, and one I don't even look at. I mean, we feel the difference, you know. We've got attraction to one, aversion to another, and indifference to the third. So in front of that object of attraction, we develop attachment and desire. And in front of the object of aversion, we develop aggression, hate, aversion. And in front of the one to whom we feel neutral to, then we feel indifferent. Remember that indifference can be a form of violence. Indifference in front of suffering is great violence. I have a personal experience. One day I got lost in the airport of Malpensa. The people who came to pick me up, they went somewhere else. They took. I had my bag. I didn't have a phone. I didn't know where they were, and I was there for a couple hours. And I thought, okay, I'll just call home because I remember that number, and then I'll tell them to call those people to come and get me here. Right? That seemed pretty easy. Unfortunately, it was so difficult to find someone who would let me use the phone to make a phone call. They was there for 2 hours asking people, and I realized that when I would go to someone to ask for a question, I would find just a frightening amount of indifference. And finally, I was able, and the time I was able to call, the line was busy. And then after a while, okay, let me try again. And then after 2 hours, I managed. I mean, I just saw in this small experience how difficult it is, difficult it is to ask for question when people are indifferent. Just a few days later, a photographer had fallen in France, and he spent 8 hours on the street, and nobody helped him. He died. I mean, so indifference can be a great form of the violence. So towards our friends, we have attraction, and towards our enemy, we have aversion, and to the one that we don't look at, so we have indifference. So towards our friend, or towards our enemy, or to our neutral one, we have these three modalities. When the other has more than us, is more intelligent, gets more attention, is richer, whatever this more is, we relate to him with envy. Instead, when he's at the same level, we're competitive, and when he has less, we're arrogant. We're never relaxed. It's very tiresome. Very tiresome. So in the end, we're always, okay, friend, attraction, enemy, aversion. Oh, I need to have more. Oh, I need to get more. I'm always comparing myself. Always looking at myself by comparing with others. It's incredibly tiring. So this is it's through all of this that makes us suffer. At the root of this, we have ignorance. Ignorance is not the ignorance of not knowing. It's the ignorance of perceiving reality in an inconsistent, incoherent way. As an example, if we see someone, anyone, the person that we see, is that person permanent or impermanent? In the sense, in continuous transformation, or is that person static? You don't need a degree in philosophy to understand that person's in continuous transformation. Don't need much to understand that. And we see each other today, and we're going to see each other in a week's time. Who do we think we're going to see? The same person or a changed person? Without philosophizing, but spontaneously. We think we're going to see today. We think we're going to see the same person today as we saw yesterday. But is that possible? I mean, a person's made of body and mind. Are the body and mind the same as a week ago? No. But in our ignorance, we see that which is permanent, that which is impermanent as being permanent. So that continuous transformation appears as being permanent, and we relate to that object as if it were. This is ignorance. We could spend hours talking about this. This is not the time to do that. When we see someone, like at the beginning, we talked about the sound. Do we live a reality that's objective or subjective? In other words, the reality we live, are we able to to perceive reality independently of our filters or not? No, so we live in a subjective reality, and my subjective reality doesn't match completely yours. So when I see you, I'm seeing you, but what I'm actually seeing is not you, but is my version of you. Because if you describe yourself, it's not going to be the same description that I'd make. And if we took 30 people, all the people we know, and each one made a detailed description of us, and we made one of ourselves, not one of these descriptions would match, because we all perceive ourselves and others through ourselves. We live this subjective reality. But when I see you, do I think that I'm seeing you, or do I understand that I'm seeing a version of you, my version of you? Without philosophizing, spontaneously, what I'm seeing is you. It's as if I asked you this sound.
No?
Did you hear the sound of the singing bowl? Did you all hear the same sound without philosophizing? Yes or no? How many singing bowls played? So without analyzing, we all heard the same sound. But now let's just analyze for a minute if we've heard the same sound or not. How does this process come about? I touch the singing bowl. I generate a certain vibration in the object that vibrates through the air that vibrates. That sound comes to each person's hearing. Our sense of hearing, sends a message to our brain, where there's this sense consciousness that perceives it, and then we attribute a name and the sound of the singing bell, and whether it's pleasurable or not. But this physical wave that gets to each one of our ears, is it the same? No, it's similar, but it's not the same. We're in different positions. It reverberates differently against the walls. Those of you who are at home watching, even more so, so the sensory object is actually different in our hearing, even if we're all human beings. Do we hear the frequencies in the exact same way? No. So that's different too. And our hearing consciousness is different, and the name we give it is different. So in this analysis, the sound that I hear and the sound that all of you hear, is it the same or different? It's different. But this reality that's subjective, without analyzing, it appears to us as being objective. The sound is there, and the object that I see is there. It's what I see. In our spontaneity, we don't have this awareness that we're living a subjective reality. This subjective reality appears to us as being objective, and we relate to it as if it were objective. So this is another form of ignorance. So according to the worldview that Buddha brought, the causes of our suffering are selfishness, this obsession of gratification, seeing reality in an incoherent way, an inconsistent way. So seeing what's impermanent as permanent, as what's subjective as being objective, etc. And also our mental defilements, these mental inner states of being that that generate the malaise and suffering together with the actions that we do, these actions that create a sort of inertia and whose results we live. Like in the law, if I kill someone or if I steal something, and I wake up the following day with total amnesia, uh, you know, uh, you know, even if I can't remember anything, I'm still responsible. And karma's like that too. Every action that we do generates a kind of inertia, like seeds that we plant that sooner or later are going to germinate. And these are the causes of our suffering. That's a third point. The third point. What is happiness? Happiness doesn't come from outside, but it's how we live reality. It's giving an example to help. Imagine at a certain point where we have a genie in the lamp. That's here. This is a Tibetan. This is the Tibetan vase. We'll call it the Tibetan lamp. It's a little bit different, not like Aladdin. Aladdin gives us three desires. Instead, here we have only one. Between two possibilities, you choose A or B. The first possibility, let's try to imagine. I can give you, the genie says, anything you want, materially speaking. Just dream it. How do you want your body to be? I can change it. You want to be taller, you want to be shorter, you want to be younger, you want to be a woman, you want to be a man. How do you want to be? I can change your body. How much money do you want to have? You want to have so much money you can't even count? Or you want to have the bank, it's, the whole bank? How many houses do you want? Materially speaking, just imagine everything you want. I'll give it to you. The people around you, how do you want them to be? How many of them do you want to be? Everything that has to do with the world surrounding you, I can help you. But with the genie, there's always a but. The but is you, inside, you stay the same. I can't do much. And the second possibility, the second choice, your body, keep what you have. Your material situation is what you have. Your job, whether you have one or not, it is what it is. And the people you share your life with, those are the same. So imagine, your life in all of the different areas stays the same. But the genie, what can he give you? Your life as it is, but without projecting our happiness onto something idealized, without suffering because reality is not the way we think it should be, an inner state of peace and satisfaction and harmony, peace with ourselves, peace with others, without jealousy, envy, fear, without anxiety, without arrogance, in a state of love towards ourselves and towards others, with harmony with ourselves and with others. Which of the two do we want? Someone would say, can I have a little bit of both? And normally, when we want a little bit of both, we don't really trust that second solution. If we say that we want the second one, then this is what we mean by happiness in Buddhism. It's called nirvana. Literally, is a state beyond suffering. We believe that it is actually possible to live in total peace and harmony independently of where I am, with whom I am and what situation I find myself with. So it's a state of happiness that is sustainable and is not conditioned by an external condition. Because, I mean, do we have control over the world around us? Even this body, Rinpoche, sometimes joking around, he would say, this body is the worst friend that we have, is the least grateful friend. The more we give it, the you know, the more we give it, the more it just takes away from us. As we get older and older, it just, as we get older and if we get sick and situations are not the way we want them, you know, uh, but we can have control on how we're going to live these situations. This is possible. This reminds me of the Stoics, the Greek Stoics. They had this philosophy that said the world is divided in two parts, that which depends on us and that which doesn't depend on us. According to them, what depends on us is our feelings, our thoughts, our morality, and our choices. That what doesn't depend on us is our body, what others do, and the situations around us, everything that's around us. And they would say, these are the Greeks. It's a little bit similar to Buddhism. He would say that suffering comes from trying to have control over what doesn't depend on us instead of trying to control what depends on us. Other people, the situations around us, that which is around us. Instead, what we do, we live as if our emotions, thoughts, and choices, we live as if those were consequences of the world around us, and we're trying constantly to change the world around us. Buddha said that the path for happiness is about cultivating our inner qualities like patience and balance, satisfaction, joy, coherence, love, harmony, that allow us to live harmoniously every situation that we meet. So happiness is an inner state of being and not an external context. Is that clear? It's quite radical somehow. It touches the root of the way we live. And as a consequence, then the question comes, what should we do to be happy and not suffer? And just one more thing before that. The view that Buddha brings us, he says, it's not true that we suffer because we can't get what we want, or we have to live situations we don't like, or because we have to separate from the things that we do like. In reality, we suffer because we want what we cannot have. Not because if I suffer because I cannot have what I want, then I'm a victim. Instead, if I realize that I suffer because I want something that causes and conditions don't allow me to have that, then the solution is inside me. It's not true because I suffer because I have to live bad situations. I suffer because I have aversion and an unhealthy way to live the situations that are there. It's not true because I suffer. It's not true that I suffer because it's not true that I suffer because I have to leave the objects of attachment. I suffer because I don't have awareness of impermanence. Because if I have awareness of the impermanence of the water, for example, I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can, you know, and and when it's over, I rejoice for having had that the opportunity to have it. But you know, we with this awareness that whatever begins finishes, whatever's born dies. It's normal. It's not a problem. What's problem is that we're attached to this idea that things should not end. It's, you know, almost as if something has done us wrong if something ends, when instead it's absolutely natural. So dying is not a problem. The problem is living badly. Death is one of the most natural thing that exists. I mean, after birth, there's death. You know, it's such a taboo in our society. There's nothing wrong in dying. The problem is living life badly, not using this opportunity that we have. And you know, you know, I mean, death is not a problem because there's no solution to it. I mean, is there the possibility of not dying? I mean, there are those who are trying. There's a company in the United States um, 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 that is financed by the wealthiest of the world. They're trying to find the solution to death. They're trying to renew the cells, and they think in 2030, those who have enough money and who are healthy enough can live to be 130. I mean, who wants to live that long? I ask myself, imagine how, sorry, 300 years. I just asked myself, like, how would psychology, a session with a psychiatrist be, with someone who's 300 years old, imagine just accumulating all those traumas and the sadness and resentments, It doesn't sound like such a good solution. Anyway, so death is natural. There's nothing wrong with dying. We need to be careful about how we're living. So, the fact that someone we love sooner or later is going to die is normal. The problem is not that someone I love dies. The problem is that when that person is still alive, the problem is not using um, those times, the time that we have, using it well. Thinking when I was in the hospital with Lama Ganchen, he would said to me with totally with great serenity and peace. He says, "I have a pain here. It means that in 2 days I'm going to die." I was there with him, where I knew that he wouldn't have lived much longer, and felt like I didn't need to ask anything. Everything that should have been done was done. Everything that needed to be said was said. That we lived our relationship, we lived life together the best way possible. So the death is not the problem. Um, Atisha, the problem is, as Atisha said, um, during the day we're distracted, and at night we're sleeping. Sometimes we forget to show our love to those who are close to us, and to cultivate the things that are important to us in our lifetime. I mean, one of the basic objective I have is to die a better person than I was when I was born. So this fourth point, what should we do to be happy and not suffer? And this is what in Buddhism is called the path, which is made up in just a very few words. It has three main points. We cultivate love towards ourselves. We develop love towards others, and we cultivate and develop a view that is consistent with reality. In a few words, we love ourselves means gradually have more and more clarity about what is good for me and what is harmful to me, physically, verbally, and mentally. Remember that words have great power. How I speak has great power over my mind, over my life. So I discern more and more what is good for me, what's bad. So loving myself is, that means to have this strength to cultivate what's good for me and abandon what's bad for me. A great part of Buddhist teachings are about this, with my my physical, verbal, and mental. What is good for me, physically, verbally, and mentally, and what's harmfully in this way too. Just on a very simple example, if something's bad for me, if something's bad for me to eat, I shouldn't eat it, for example. So one of the first steps is to have this strength to cultivate what's good for us and abandon what's bad. And we can spend weeks talking about this, getting into all the details. The second central point is about loving others. Loving others means that we understand that, selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. That in reality, when we open up our hearts to others, it's good for us. And just to specify here, love, we use, it comes is it amare is from Latin, and love, I think, is from Sanskrit. Okay, from it's so amare in Italian comes is camare in Sanskrit, and love comes from lubya in Sanskrit too. So lubya and kama, both in Sanskrit. So the roots of amare in the Latin languages and love in English, they have um, kama is passionate desire. Like I love chocolate. So if I say I love chocolate, what do I mean? That when I have chocolate, I feel good. I want chocolate because it makes me feel good. This is the love of kama. I love you. I want you. I want you in order to be happy. But in Sanskrit, it's another word, and unfortunately, there's no translation. It's maitri. Maitri literally means is a love. That means I want you to be happy. Your happiness is important to me. This is the feeling. I mean, the difference is clear. One thing is, you know, one thing is your happiness is important for me. Another thing is you are important for my happiness. So if I love you in the same way I love chocolate, and at a certain point you don't make me happy anymore, then I don't love you anymore. Like with the panettone can happen. But if your happiness is important to me, this love goes beyond whether you make me happy or not, or how you are or how you are not. Your happiness is a priority for me. This is what we mean by love in this context. Sometimes we, you know, you know, sometimes we can have both feelings, the feeling of love, maitri, and the feeling of kama, love. This, I want you to be happy, but you are also important for my happiness. So, because we're actually using the same word for two very different feelings. So when we talk about developing love towards others, we're talking about seeing others beyond ourselves, giving importance to others independently of ourselves without creating duality in the sense of when I'm doing something for someone else, it's a sacrifice to myself. Or if I'm doing for myself, I feel guilty. No, the objective is to get to a state where when I'm doing something for others, I'm doing it for myself as well, or when I'm doing something for myself, I'm doing it also for others, because it should not be a sacrifice. And there's a small exercise, and if you want, you can do this exercise, where once a day, or possibly more than once, go to someone that you don't know, or someone you don't have like a daily contact. Maybe it's someone we don't see daily, and you go to this person and tell them, not verbally, but you say, "I love you." Maybe I'm at the supermarket or I'm at the pharmacy. I'm I'm in front of someone, and the person in front of me is not the checkout person. It is a person. It's not the fonctionnaire. It's a person. I allow myself to say to that person inside, your happiness is important to me. Want you to be happy. I desire your happiness. Just that. And we can even add, your happiness is as important to me as my own. I desire you to be happy. Be happy. Allow yourself to say that inside, you know. Once a day at least, even to those close to us. But try to do it to those that we don't really know, that we don't see. This is a fundamental point to, this is fundamental to for our own happiness. Develop this love and compassion. Love their happiness and compassion, that they're free from suffering. We talked about that inner strength of wanting to be happy and to not suffer. So we're just going to expand that feeling towards others. The way I don't want to suffer, also you is the same for you. Means going beyond selfishness. This is development of altruism. This is this second fundamental point. The third is about developing correct view of reality. Train in seeing that which is impermanent as being impermanent, what is subjective as being subjective, just in just a few words. To do all of this, there's a division of study, and then there's also a lifestyle, conduct, and then there are also techniques like meditation. Just in two words, meditation is it's literally meditate means to familiarize, to habituate in Tibetan. In Italian, meditate, or in English, gives the idea of reflecting. Meditate on this means reflect on the meaning of this. Oh, you did something wrong. Meditate on that. So think about what you've done. Instead, gom in Tibetan, which is translated as meditate from Tibetan, literally it means to familiarize oneself. So the concept of meditation is to generate inner states of like positive and virtuous inner states. Like if I'm going to meditate on love, I'm going to induce a feeling of love to create familiarity with that feeling. So just in a few words, I'm going to generate certain mental and certain positive mental or or feelings, that are not spontaneous, but to familiarize myself with that feeling. But to do this, one needs to be able to direct one's mind. So one needs to be able to be with oneself, to tell the mind stay here, and the mind stays there. Today, unfortunately, the mind is like like a monkey in a tree, jumping from one branch to the next. To meditate, it's really important to tell the mind to stay, and it does. And here we have meditations with techniques on our breath, or the self-awareness of one's breath, or of oneself, to keep the mind still. We take the reins of our mind in our hands, and once I'm able to do that, then I can direct the mind in one way or another. This is about meditation. In another time, we can do an introduction of meditation, where you can experience some techniques. But today, um, you know, today meditation is used as a technique to relax, and that's just a positive side effect. It's not the reason why one should meditate. One should meditate to familiarize oneself with positive aspects of one's mind, and it's a marvelous tool. Just to conclude, what is Buddhism? It's a worldview, it's a paradigm, which is very different than the one that we live in. It's a paradigm that says suffering doesn't depend on the world that we're living, and you can't find the happiness. You can't find happiness in the world outside, but how we live that world. And we need to direct ourselves and our desire not to create and idealize the perfect world, but instead to cultivate our inner resources that allow us to live a world peacefully and harmoniously, independently of the conditions that we find ourselves in. It's a difficult objective, but it's possible. It's everyone has a potential to become a Buddha. There's no one who can't, who doesn't have that potential. And another fundamental characteristic is that our mind is malleable. It's made of habits. So the more I act in one way, the more the mind gets used to being like that. The more I think in one way. Uh, in Tibetan, it says that there's an old text, an ancient text that says nothing is impossible or nothing is difficult once one's used to it. Nothing. Habits. Habits need. Habits can be changed by repeating and repeating. Everything should go in the direction of what we want to become. So a fundamental point should be asking ourselves, what do I want? And what I want in the Buddhist view, here represented by all these strange images of Buddhas around us. These are not gods around us. These are this kind of archetypes that represents our qualities that are developed to the highest degree. Remember that a Buddha is a state, not a person, and they represent our qualities that are that are developed, fully developed. The green, for example, is a power of realization, of the joy for the happiness of others, and non-fear. The yellow is generosity, and blue is compassion and stability. Red is satisfaction and concentration. White is harmony and wisdom. These are qualities that we want to develop. So one of the bases of Buddhism is having a personal utopia, or we ask ourselves, who do I want to be? Which is not it's not what I want to do or what I want to have, but who do I want to be? Do I want to be a patient person, joyous, harmonious, who lives life with respect and gratitude and harmony? So once I want that, isn't like saying I want to be a Buddha. Okay, then now it's time to get to work. You know, it's it's 1% of inspiration and 99% of sweat. You know, so where we direct ourselves to achieve what we want. Someone asks if Buddha's a religion or not, or they ask, can I follow Buddhism if I'm Christian? I mean, we're here with our arms open to share with anyone. You can take what you want. Often Lama Ganshin would go to him and said, Rinpoche, I like to go to this place or know this, meet this master. He would say, you go. And what you find of benefit, take. What's not useful for you, leave. So we're open to everyone at any time to share what we have. And our objective is what we shared today. As Atisha is the master who brought Buddhism to Tibet, who is represented here to my right with the red hat. He said, respect all spiritual traditions, all religions, and follow with determination the one you prefer. We need to follow the tradition that we've received, but we can also take and learn from here and from there. I like to make one request to all of you. I don't have this objective to make everyone Buddhist. This is really the last. This is the last thing. Our objective is not to be Buddhist. The objective is to cultivate more love, more respect, gratitude, more satisfaction, less hate, less resentment, less anger. Live life with more harmony. Yes, I'd like this, you know. So if there's something that you've heard that could be of benefit for you today, try to remember it. Try to put it into practice. Don't let it just go, because life goes by quickly. I thank you for being here with your heart that's open and with your and with paying attention, with your attention. In the afternoon, there will be a refuge ceremony. It's where one formalizes this desire to following the Buddhist path. And it's not something that used to be public. Usually someone makes a request after a long process of reflection, but given the many commitments that I have, decided in this time to make it a monthly ceremony. If you're curious and you want to come, you're welcome. If you want to participate and actually take refuge for the first time or renew your refuge vows, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone. The tradition so at the beginning we generate motivation, and at the end we dedicate what we've done that was positive. We dedicate it to peace. And
Lame kutse rapten chi nam karatin le chokchur ge padang losan tempe dreme sasumge drove munsela takto ne gyurche kewa kuntu yanda lamadang dralme cheki pela longcheching sadan lamge yende rabzone dorje change kopa nyur tobesho nimodele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shing, ninsen takto delek pe, koncho sumke jinge lob, koncho sumke ngodrubutsol, koncho sumke trashe shu. Possa la preziosa mente pacifica, che non è ancora nata, sorgere.
May the precious, peaceful mind that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has already arisen continue to develop. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Thank you very much. Have a good lunch.